If you've ever spent way too many late nights on Minecraft servers, you already understand the kind of magic that can happen when a game hands creativity over to its community. And that's where Hytale's story really begins. Not in a boardroom, not in a studio skyscraper, but in the messy, scrappy world of Minecraft maps, minigames, and modders building things just because it's fun. Long before Hytale had a name, Hypixel started as two people, Simon and Rezis, making Minecraft adventure maps. They'd spend endless hours stitching ideas together, uploading creations, and slowly building an audience. That hobby didn't stay small for long. Eventually, they launched their own server, and that server grew into something enormous. Millions of players, a global community, and even multiple Guinness World Records. At that point, Hypixel wasn't just a server, it was proof that community-driven creativity could compete with real game studios. But here's the key part. Hypixel was never meant to be the finish line. For Simon and Rezis, it was the training ground. Their dream was to take everything they'd learned, how players explore, how communities form, how creators push boundaries, and turn it into a standalone game built for those people from day one. Not a game that allowed mods, but a game that expected them. Not a world where creativity was an afterthought, but the backbone. That dream became Hypixel Studios, and their first project became Hytale. By the time Hytale was publicly revealed in December 2018, the team said they'd already been working on it for around 3 years, and when the announcement finally dropped, it landed like a meteor. The trailer didn't just get attention, it detonated across the internet, because it didn't look like Minecraft but different. It looked like a complete fantasy sandbox universe with purpose-built tools, polished combat, creatures with personality, and most importantly, a clear obsession with what players and creators actually do inside sandbox games. From the very beginning, Hytale was pitched as 3 big pillars. First, an adventure mode, a procedurally generated fantasy world where you could go on an RPG-style journey alone or with friends, exploring biomes, finding dungeons, battling monsters, hunting rare loot, and basically living inside a blocky adventure novel. Second, minigames, not as a side mode, but as part of the DNA, because Hypixel's roots were in building minigames that kept millions of players coming back. Hytale wasn't trying to abandon that legacy, it was trying to evolve it. And third, creative tools. This was the part that made longtime creators sit up straight. The goal wasn't just build stuff. The goal was make it possible for players to create worlds, content, experiences, and servers that feel like entirely new games. And under all of this was a philosophy that sounds simple, but is incredibly hard to execute. Community servers shouldn't feel like second-class citizens. They should feel like the point. Early on, Hypixel Studios was very open about the idea that players would run their own servers, build custom experiences, and shape the ecosystem the way Minecraft's creators did, but with official support, modern tools, and a foundation designed for it. They even explained technical choices that hinted at the scale of what they were aiming for. The client was written in C#, and servers ran on Java, a setup meant to support performance and flexibility for server hosts. Then came 2019, and something happened that would shape the next several years of Hytale's life. Hype didn't just grow, it snowballed into pressure. By July 2019, the team said the announcement trailer had hit 50 million views, and that kind of attention changes a project. It changes expectations, it changes the stakes. Suddenly, Hytale wasn't just a promising sandbox RPG, it was the Minecraft challenger. Whether the team wanted that label or not, the internet had already written the headline. Later in 2019, Hypixel Studios addressed the reality of that moment. The attention was amazing, but also intimidating. They talked about the anxiety that came with being intensely analyzed and how important it was to make the right first impression because you only get one launch. And then they made a statement that set the tone for what would come next. They were planning for Hytale to be playable by everyone in 2021. That date mattered because it created a clock, and once you set a clock, every delay feels louder. Behind the scenes, the studio wasn't just building a game, they were building a company capable of delivering one. At launch, Hypixel Studios was self-funding development from the success of the Hypixel server, but Hytale's scope was massive. So they looked for outside investment, and in 2018, they announced that Riot Games was coming in as an investor, along with an angel advisory group of well-known industry veterans. What's especially wild is that the relationship with Riot didn't start as a purchase, it started as advice. The studio said they initially approached Riot back in 2016, looking for guidance on how to grow a studio with roots in a modding community. That detail matters because it shows the original mindset. We're community people and we want to build this the right way. Then, in April 2020, everything escalated. Riot Games fully acquired Hypixel Studios. At the time, the messaging was optimistic. Hypixel Studios would get more resources, more stability, and more support to build something genre-defining. Riot described Hytale as a community-powered block game, combining sandbox scale with RPG depth. It sounded like the perfect match, a giant publisher with experience running massive live ecosystems, backing a studio born from one of the biggest community-run ecosystems in gaming. But here's where the story gets complicated, because more resources don't automatically mean faster results. In game development, bigger ambition often expands to fill whatever time you give it, and the Hytale team was not shy of ambition. By early 2022, they revealed one of the biggest pivots in the entire project. They decided to redevelop Hytale's engine, both client and server, in C++. The reason wasn't just tech curiosity, they listed major goals, making multi-platform releases easier, improving performance, and building a stronger long-term foundation for patching and maintaining the game. In other words, they weren't just polishing, they were rebuilding. This is one of those moments where a game's development history splits into before and after, because rewriting an engine isn't like moving furniture around. It's like rebuilding a house while also trying to keep the original dream alive. Every system has to be recreated, every tool has to be rebuilt, every feature you showed in trailers has to be made real again on a new foundation. And while all that was happening, the genre didn't stand still. Minecraft kept evolving, new survival crafting games kept launching, players' expectations for combat, animation, content scale, online infrastructure, all of it kept rising. By early 2025, Hypixel Studios was still talking about engine redevelopment progress and bringing gameplay systems online. They described focusing on fundamentals like movement, block placement, combat, crafting, and creator-side features like copy and paste and undo-redo, with internal playtesting planned throughout the year. And then came the moment that for years fans feared would happen. On June 23, 2025, Hypixel Studios announced they were ending development on Hytale and beginning the process of winding down the studio. CEO Aaron Noxie Donaghy said it became clear they couldn't bring Hytale to life in a way that truly delivered on its promise. After roughly a decade of development, from the early work that became Hytale, through announcement hype, through investment, through acquisition, through technical reinvention, the project appeared to be over. For a lot of people, that was the end of the story, another ambitious game lost to the realities of time, technology, and impossible expectations. But Hytale didn't end there. In November 2025, the story took a turn that almost never happens in modern gaming. The original founders reacquired Hytale from Riot Games, and they didn't come back with vague promises. They came back with a plan. They announced they had rehired more than 30 developers who knew the project deeply. They said they were fully independent, with no outside investors or publishers controlling the roadmap, and they made a personal commitment to fund Hytale for the next 10 years. Then they made a decision that shocked a lot of people, but made perfect sense for a project trying to survive. They were returning to a legacy build, the older version of Hytale that had been abandoned years ago, not because it was perfect, but because it existed, it worked, and it could be rebuilt into something playable faster than continuing down a slower road. They framed it as a true early access approach, messy, buggy, and unfinished, but finally in the hands of players, so the community that believed in Hytale could actually be part of shaping it. And a couple of weeks later, they announced the early access launch date, January 13th, 2026. Pre-purchases would open in December 2025, and the message was clear. Hytale is back, and this time it's going to live or die by momentum and community involvement, not by years of silence.